affirm the following testimony will be the truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
What's your name, sir?
Chris Leidy.
And what's your current job title?
I'm the city manager in Lake City, Georgia.
What county do you live in right now?
I live in Newton.
Did at one point you work in the Midtown area?
I did.
Tell me what you were doing in the Midtown area, please.
I worked as a director of public safety in charge of their clean operations and safety operations for Midtown Alliance.
What is Midtown Alliance?
It's a nonprofit organization for the Midtown Improvement District.
Is it charged with law enforcement type responsibilities?
In part of the funding for them, they fund public safety programs, and that's what I ran. I had off-duty APD officers as well as non-sworn security personnel.
And I think you have a law enforcement background yourself.
I do. I was a retired major from the Atlanta Police Department, and I was the chief of police in the city of Morrow. So I had 25 years of law enforcement and then 3 years in Midtown, so 28 years in public safety.
And it was director of public safety for Midtown Alliance, I think you said?
Yes, sir.
During what time period did you hold that office?
I went there, started in April of 2014 rather, until December of 2016.
I'm going to show you an exhibit that's already been marked as Plaintiff Exhibit 20 to another deposition in this case. Does the Jimmy John's here look familiar?
It does.
Is that from the area where you worked?
It would appear to be. The Fido's is to the right of it, Nuke's is next door, and then the UPS store is to the left. And if you went past the UPS store, there's a sweet shop right there. And so unless there was another store that would have all those, this would be the one we're talking about.
Did you have any dealings with this Jimmy John's store when you were the director of public safety for Midtown Alliance?
I did.
How did that come about?
Well, outside of being there a couple of times as a customer, my boss, Kevin Green, the CEO for Midtown Alliance, had made comments to me on a couple of different occasions about the concerns and complaints he was receiving about Jimmy John bicycle riders, their delivery guys. And so eventually he was frustrated enough, he wrote a letter to him, and I went by and talked to one of the managers pertaining to, wasn't so much about the bicycles being on the sidewalk because the public rode on the sidewalk as well, but it was the manner in which they were riding. They rode very recklessly. I mean, they rode very fast. They would ride in and around people, and I didn't think it was very safe. And so I asked them on one occasion, and then I had to go back on a second occasion later. And I don't know what the time frame was on that, to be quite frank, but my boss started complaining because it would get better, and then it would get worse. And so anytime my boss brought it up, or if I saw something, but eventually I had to go talk to another manager, and I can't remember the guy's name. But the reason why I remember the conversation is when I had told them aware of the situation, the riders riding, and that I was afraid someone was going to get hurt. His response was that they weren't their employees, they were contractors. And I kind of thought that was odd because I told him in response, they're wearing Jimmy John shirts, so I would think the people would believe that they were Jimmy John's employees. And so, and he agreed. He said, I'll talk to them and see what happens. But you know, they're on their own. And so that was kind of the response I got from them. And then, like I said, it would get better for a while, and then it would get worse. But that was the last time I had any conversations with the Jimmy John manager about it.
You mentioned a minute ago communication in writing from, I think, Mr. Green to someone.
Right, he sent an email out that he shared with me that he had was going to send to someone in the Jimmy John's organization, and it was pretty stern language about someone going to get hurt, and that he had personally witnessed on more than one occasion someone almost getting struck by one of their delivery people.
I'll show you what I've marked as Plaintiff Exhibit 23, and I'll tell you as I hand it to you, 23 is an email exchange. And to read the very first one, which I think may be the one you're referring to, you have to flip to the very back of it. You've got to read back to front. But look at that initial email on the back page of Plaintiff Exhibit 23 and tell me if that looks familiar to you, please.
This is the one that I'm aware of from Kevin.
That's the one you were talking about a minute ago?
Because he and I had a conversation when he talked about I don't have the personnel to detail an off-duty officer. we had a conversation about what it would take for us to enforce no bicycles on the sidewalks, because it is in violation of city code to ride bicycles on sidewalks in Atlanta. And part of the issue that we had was in the selective enforcement of it was because you couldn't stop just Jimmy John's riders from riding on sidewalks, but anybody riding a bicycle. And so it was kind of a two-sided sword on whether they wanted to do the enforcement or not.
I wanted to ask you another question based on this picture I'm showing you now, which I'll represent to you. Is an overhead view taken off Google Maps. And I believe that the rectangle there is at least approximately where Jimmy John's is, and that circle, I can tell you, is where my client was struck. Does this look like the area that you were in charge of taking care of, part of the area you were concerned with?
Yes, sir. Although I don't know exactly where the Jimmy John's is, but that's the block on there that we're talking about. And the reason why I know that is you've got Peachtree Place over here northeast, and that corner right there, right here, was where my office was at. It was behind the Taco Mac. So we were right down that. It's actually not a city street. It's a privately owned street. That's why it's not 10th Street. That's why it's Peachtree Place.
I'll hand you a Sharpie. Put a star where your office was, if you don't mind.
About,
Better make it a big star because it's
Yeah.
a dark spot on the...
I'll do this right here.
There we go.
It's about right there where that mark is. Or at that time, the office was right down that street right there.
All right.
Right behind Taco Mac.
When you spoke with the managers and the folks at Jimmy John's, did you ever warn them that, in your judgment at least, someone's going to get hurt?
Well, and that's why that was the meeting. I guess the crutch of the meeting was that seeing the speed of it and seeing how they've gone in and out, that was our concern, was that somebody was going to get hit. And it was concern for their bike riders too. I mean, you know, when you hit an object, not only the pedestrian get hurt, but the riders going to get hurt. And we didn't want to see anybody get hurt. You know, the Midtown is advertised obviously as a walkable community, and that was, you know, obviously an issue we were having, and we were getting quite a few complaints coming in about the bicycles speeding on the sidewalk, particularly right there in the area, and it's really congested there. I mean, you've got a lot of different restaurants. You have a couple of big office buildings right there, so there's a lot of people on those sidewalks. And unfortunately, they were on the sidewalks at the same time the riders were because of lunchtime. So Jimmy John's wanted to deliver food while at the same time the office people were coming out to go to lunch. And so that's what created a lot of the safety concerns for us.
You mentioned, I think, that you've been a few times to visit the folks at Jimmy John's, and I suspect
At
you
least
did
a couple of times. I don't know exactly the number, but I know at least on 2 occasions I did speak with them.
Was at least one of those before January 2016?
I would be pretty sure it was. I think because it wasn't long after Kevin wrote the email, I think that was in 2015. So it was that summer, if I'm not mistaken.
That this email here, the last page of Plaintiff's Exhibit 23, is dated May 27, 2015. Is that the one you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And so that was 2015, and so it would be sometime after that when I had the conversation.
Are you being compensated or paid in any way to testify today?
No, sir.
Did you receive a subpoena?
No, sir.
Why did you agree to give this deposition?
Kevin Green actually contacted me because I guess you had spoken with Kevin, and he actually asked me if it was all right for him to pass on my information. And to be quite honest, I felt that as the public safety director during the time period that was in question here, that it was still part of my job. I enjoyed my time at Midtown Alliance. There was nothing bad about there. And being a law enforcement officer for over 28 years, or in public safety that long, I just felt it was the right thing to do.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Leidy?
Leidy or Chris, however you want to call it.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
all right. Chris, my name is Brent Terry. I represent JJ's of Atlanta,
Sure.
who's the owner of that particular Jimmy John's.
Yes, sir.
If I understood your testimony right, what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, is that the complaints that you were aware of and that Kevin Green related to you was Jimmy John's bicycle delivery riders riding too fast on the sidewalks, kind of weaving in and out of
Yes,
people
sir.
on the sidewalks?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. And you went to see and talk to the managers of this Jimmy John's store?
Right.
At least on 2 occasions that
Right.
you can recall?
Yes, sir.
Now, you had executed a sworn affidavit for Mr. Butler in April of this year, and in that you stated that after your meetings with the management, the behavior of the bicyclists got better for a time,
Yep.
but then after a while it would get worse again.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, I want to, if I could, look at the email stack, this Plaintiff's Exhibit 23.
Yes, sir.
And we'll start at the back because that's the very first email. That's the one you said that Kevin Green shared with you, so you were aware of it, that he intended to send it to Jimmy John's, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, if you'll flip forward to, if you look down at the bottom right-hand corner of Plaintiff's Exhibit 23, there's page numbers, page 1 of 10 through...
Right.
Okay, turn to page 5 of 10.
Okay.
And that's an email dated June 4th from Kevin to Chris Coulter at Jimmy John's.
Yep.
Okay, and could you read what it says?
Yes, sir. Says, Chris, there's been a notable improvement. Thanks very much to you and your managers. Kevin.
Now let's look back at the email that on page, excuse me, let me start over. If we could look at page 9 of 10.
Yes, sir.
This is an email from Chris Coulter to Kevin Green dated May 27, 2015.
Right.
See that? And it's, based on the way this is put together by plaintiff's counsel, it appears that this is an email sent to Kevin Green by Chris Coulter responding to Kevin Green's email to him. Does it appear that way to you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in that email, Chris Coulter says to Kevin, trust me, I share your frustration, and this has been a battle since the beginning, as I'm sure you are aware. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, the last sentence of paragraph 1 of this email says, Chris Coulter wrote, every time myself or one of our managers has witnessed a person riding on the sidewalk, they have been sent home immediately and suspended. And then in parentheses it says multiple infractions have resulted in termination. Is that right?
That's what it says in this.
Right. That's what the email says.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So if that's true, then clearly that's indicative of management attempting to discipline riders that people complain about, or that where they see them riding on the sidewalk, which is the complaint you were addressing, right?
That's what the email says. But I would say this too, though. I think it depends on who the managers work.
I understand, but that's what the email indicates.
That's what the email says. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
all right. And I think you indicated that when you did talk to the managers and you couldn't remember their names
Right,
as you sit here
yeah.
today,
Right.
which is understandable. But ultimately, they told you, yeah, we'll talk to them and see what we can do.
Right.
All right.
The last response from the last one I talked with, though, was that they were contractors, but he would do what he could.
Okay. But he said he would do what he could.
Yes, sir.
And after that visit, that was one of the visits where you saw and said in your affidavit that the behavior of the bicyclists got better, at least for a while.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And you left your employment at Midtown in December of 2016.
I did. December 19th was my, I think December 19th was my last day.
Okay. So you don't have any direct knowledge about what may have happened or what may have gone on since then?
No, sir.
Okay. And you wouldn't have any knowledge one way or the other about what management did in response to your 2 visits?
No, sir.
Okay. You weren't there when they, if they did anything at all, you
No,
weren't
sir.
there to see it, and they didn't
No, sir.
report to you?
No, sir.
You just noted the way the bicycle riders' behavior improved after you visited for a while?
For a while.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir. That's all my questions right now. I appreciate your time.
Yes, sir.
Whitey, after things got better, with Jimmy John's, did they go back to where they were, or did they stay better?
No, sir, they would always inevitably go back, and it depends on the riders, you know, and like I said, I think it's like a lot of companies or organizations, it depends on who it is the person that's in charge and how active they are in dealing with that. But the riders are riders, and once they got away from the, you know, when they're riding down the sidewalk, they would continue to do their speeding, and it would be, you know, at times where there was bicycles and pedestrians, and that's a tough thing to do when the sidewalk's only, you know, so wide.
You mentioned a couple times about the independent contractors, that
Right.
someone at Jimmy John's said that their riders were independent contractors. Do I remember that right? All right. I want to show you what I'll mark first as Plaintiff's Exhibit 25, and then sort of in connection with that, I'll show you what I'll mark as Plaintiff's, 26. Now, I'll represent to you that what I'm showing you at 25 is what we call a request for admissions, where my client and I make a statement, and the request is for Jimmy John's to either admit it or deny it. So if you look in 25, the heading of which is Plaintiff's second request for admissions, and go to the second page of the exhibit, you see highlighted a statement there that says, at the time of the collision with Mr. Ellis, Noah Shell, that is the bicyclist who struck Mr. Ellis, was an employee of Defendant JJ's. You see that?
Yes, sir.
Now, look on 26, Exhibit 26, which is Defendant's response. You see how it says Defendant's JJ's of Atlanta, LLC's, and Chris Coulter's response there.
Yes,
in
sir.
the middle. And the response to number 1 says admitted, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Does that appear to be contrary to what the managers told you?
That it would appear that way from this paper.
I want to ask you about one more thing. If you'll pull back out the email exchange, which is Exhibit 23. And the defense drew your attention to page 5 of 10, and let's look back at that one.
Okay.
And that's the one, it does say there's been a notable improvement, right?
Yes, sir.
That's June 4, 2015, right?
Yes, sir.
Let's go back to page 1 of 10.
Okay.
What's the date on that one?
September 9th, 2015.
What is the very first sentence?
Chris,
say?
no visible progress from our observations.
What about those last 2 sentences?
Says, just watch 3 of your delivery people swerve around pedestrian like it's a game, with one locking up his rear tire to spin around and dismount, all on a crowded sidewalk. This is an unacceptable situation. Someone is going to get hurt. Please advise.
Do you see in Plaintiff's Exhibit 23 any response to that email?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, you understand that the 2 exhibits plaintiffs just showed you are where defendants admitted and said in this lawsuit officially in August of 2016 that Noah Shell was an employee.
Yes, sir.
You don't see anything in there where the defendant ever contended in this lawsuit that Noah Shell or any of his bicycle delivery riders were independent contractors or anything other than employees.
No, sir, but I don't think Mr. Coulter was the individual I spoke with.
Okay. You don't know the name of the individual you spoke
I
with?
don't, and I'm sorry to hear that. The only reason why I even remember the conversation is because of the fact that it struck me as odd when he made a comment about they were contractors.
Mm-hmm. And if that was that your second visit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was that in 2015?
I believe it would have to be after this email sent in 2015. Yes, sir.
Okay.
That would be fair to say.
All right. And you don't know you can't tell us the identity of who made that statement?
No, sir. It was a white male. Is about all I can remember.
Okay. All right. But even whether they're employees or not, he told you they would try and do something about it.
Yes, sir.
And from what you observed, it appeared that they tried to do something about it.
They did.
Now, the individual that was involved in this incident, the bicycle delivery rider, was Noah Shell. Do you happen to, does that name ring a bell? Do you recall
No, sir.
anything about him? Any complaints, any prior history of prior problems before this incident happened in January 26th? Anything you remember?
No, sir.
Do you know who Noah Shell is?
No, sir.
Would you know him if he was sitting at this table with us?
No, sir.
Is there any way you would know if he had prior infractions with his Jimmy John's employers?
No, sir.
That's all I have.
Going